we're going to look at a question type in the reading section of the IELTS called flowchart or chart completion questions. Let's take a look at how to answer these. First, let's just take a quick look at what these questions look like. So you're going to have a flowchart that's going to look something like this. Okay, we've got these arrows in the middle of the screen, and then each of the boxes there are filled with some text or some language that you'll have to read. These could be complete sentences or often just short phrases that are not complete sentences. Okay. Now, the purpose of this, of displaying the information this way, is to show a sequence of events. A flowchart shows a process or a sequence of events from beginning to end. So what you're trying to do when you get one of these questions is to figure out, based on the passage, what information to put in each step of the sequence. In this case, we're looking at this sample flowchart here, and this particular one is all about the standard revision process. Okay, so we can expect that in the reading, we're going to read about the standard revision process, whatever that is. And then I think if we look down at the information here, it seems like they're discussing steps that must go into revising a paper or some type of academic work, okay? Something like that. So we can expect in the reading to find information providing those steps, okay? That's what you're looking for in this type of question, where you need to look to the reading passage to discover how things move from the first step to the last step in whatever they're describing. All right, now some advice about how to approach this question type. Okay, like other types of completion questions that we've seen, that you see in other lessons, things like summary completion and diagram completion, these chart completion questions often come from text that is only in one part of the passage. Okay, so it might be in one paragraph or a couple of paragraphs that are close by each other. Not spread, the information is not spread all throughout the passage, usually. So one of the strategies for this question type is if you find a small section of the passage where you think all of the information is contained, it can be a very good idea to read that section in detail so that you can understand fully the process that's described. Okay, later in this lesson, we're going to have a sample set of questions, and that's the case. They all come from one paragraph, and I think if you read that paragraph slowly and carefully, it would be a good way to answer those questions. Okay, now for this question type, when you have phrases with short answers to fill in particular, or sentences with short answers, it is often possible to determine what kind of grammatical form is required to fill in the blank. Okay, so for example, let's look at our sample flowchart set of questions from earlier in the lesson. Take a look. If you want to, go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to, and see if you can figure out what form of the word is going to be required for questions 1 to 3. Okay? If you want to do that, go ahead and pause it now. Okay, so possibly you paused your video. What did you find? Well, for number 1, it seems pretty clear that we are going to look for an action of some type of a verb. You're supposed to do something to the text. Okay, so what will that be? All right, well, proofread, read the text, write the text, we don't know. But to know what type of word is coming is a good clue. Number 2, submit a revision to, well, to whom? Or is it an office of some kind? Is it the teacher? Is it your tutor or somebody helping you from the workshop you attended? What is it that you're supposed to submit a revision to? So it's going to be a noun, right? It's going to be something, or some office or some place your revision is supposed to go. Okay, and then number 3, meet with your revision partner for what? Is it an activity? Is it a meeting? What is it? Okay, you're going to meet someone to do something, okay, or for some type of process that you're doing with your revision, okay? It could be a time period, okay? Meet with your revision partner for 1 hour, right? There are a number of things that could go there, but thinking through each of these questions in this way can give you some good clues. Okay, number 3 then, use the given information on the chart to help you scan, right? So not every line in a flow chart is going to have a blank usually. And there's enough information there to give you clues about what information you need to find. Since a flow chart describes a process, okay, we know that any completed line we have there is one step in that process, and we need to find the next step if we have a blank on the next line, okay? Study the given information on the flow chart to know exactly what kind of information you're supposed to search for in the passage. It's just like any other scanning technique that you would use for other IELTS reading question types. You need to be careful with this, okay? So a flowchart does show a sequence from beginning to end, but that does not necessarily mean that that information will come in order in the passage. Often it will. Often when we describe a sequence of things, a writer will go from beginning to end. Okay, so that's a typical pattern, but it's not necessarily what you're going to find in the IELTS reading passage you're looking at. You could find different steps in the process out of order in the passage depending on what's presented to you. Okay, so just be careful. There's no requirement for this question type that the answers come in order in the passage. All right, finally then, just like other of these completion types where you've got some type of visual you're working with, there are 2 types. The first type is where you have a box with answer choices. Often the answer choices will be paraphrases of things that are found in the passage. So you're going to use them as sort of keywords that you're going to search for in the passage to determine if they work for the question. The second type is just a standard short answer question. You look for how many words are allowed, how many numbers are allowed. In this example, it's 1, but it could be 2 or 3, and there could be numbers. Okay, so this is a case where you need to really read the directions carefully to know how many words are allowed. Let's look at a sample question in order to practice this skill just a little bit. I am again going to invite you to pause the video when I put the flowchart back on the screen in just 1 second. Go ahead and try to answer the questions you see there. They are related to the text you see below in the text box. Okay, there's a paragraph, just a small section of a larger article where the answers to these questions can be found. Okay, so use your strategies. Study the flowchart carefully, look for the information you need to find in the passage, and then go read the passage in order to try to fill in the boxes the best you can, okay? In this case, you're allowed to use 2 words to fill in the boxes, to fill in the blanks in the flowchart. Okay, so here comes the question. Go ahead and pause your video and try to look for the answers. Okay, so you paused your video and hopefully you found the correct answers. Let's walk through the explanations for these to see how well you did and what you found there. Okay, so we've got here the Battle of Hastings, and the little paragraph below is all about a sequence of events that happened in the Battle of Hastings, right? So at the very beginning, the first sentences of the paragraph below cover this first step in the process. The English army seemed to be winning, seemed to be taking the lead in that battle against the Normans. All right, and then the next step here, we've got King Harold. So what happened with King Harold? Well, we have a paraphrase of what you find in the text. He orders his troops. He demands that they maintain, okay? To maintain. What does that mean? Well, that's a key word in this particular step in the flowchart because it corresponds with the sentence that gives you the answer. The sentence that gives you the answer is it mentions defensive positions or just positions. Okay. Also, in the next sentence after that, an acceptable answer would be their line. Okay, because what King Harold ordered his troops to do was mentioned here. Although King Harold told the English to hold their defensive positions, okay, it goes on to say they got too excited and they went and chased after the Normans, right? Later it says in the next sentence, if they held their line, okay, then they might have won, right? Something like that. Okay, so this is the part of this, the sentence that's paraphrased in the flowchart, right? So King Harold told the English to hold. Okay, hold is your synonym for maintain from the question in the flowchart. Okay, and that was a key word that allowed you to answer this question with defensive positions or just positions. Again, if you said the line, which came later, that would also work. It's the same idea. Okay, the next step in the process, English troops exhilarated to see Norman troops what? Okay, so again, this is not a complete sentence here. The English troops were exhilarated. What does exhilarate mean? To be exhilarated? Well, it's a key word, obviously, and it means excited. Okay, they were very happy to see that the Norman troops retreated. Okay, they were exhilarated to see the Norman troops retreat. Or later in the sentence, it says fleeing. Okay, so both work grammatically here. English troops exhilarated to see Norman troops fleeing or retreat. Both of those options work perfectly fine, and they come from this sentence down below. The Normans began to retreat. Although King Harold told the English to hold their defensive positions, the sight of the fleeing Normans was too exciting. Okay, there's our key word, exhilarating. It was exhilarating for the English troops to see the fleeing Normans. They were excited. So that's why these two things work well. The retreat and the fleeing are what excited or exhilarated the English troops. That's why these two answers work for this step in the flowchart. Okay, we have one more step then in the process in this paragraph. The English troops chased the Normans, okay, and we know that this is where the problem started for the English. They were so excited, they were chasing after them, even though King Harold told them to hold their line or keep their position. And then we get the last part. The English were fooled by the faked Norman retreat. The faked retreat. To fake something means it was pretend, right? It was a strategy from the Normans to defeat the English in this case. And that's what we get in this line down here. Instead, the English began to pursue their opponents, but the Norman retreat had been faked. Okay, faked Norman retreat was the answer to the question that works. Okay, so hopefully that went pretty smoothly for you using the strategies we described from the beginning of the lesson. For example, did you try to find the part of speech that your answers would require, right? King Harold orders troops to maintain. This one very clearly should be a noun. It's an object of maintain. What needs to be maintained? Well, the answer is going to be a noun in this case. Okay, so that would work really well for this if you could analyze the sentence that way. Okay, you could do that with the others as well and get some valuable information. But remember, the basic strategies for this lesson are to find the location of the information in the passage, right? It's most likely going to be in one small section of the reading passage, so it may be a good idea to read that entire section carefully in order to make sure you understand how the information flows from beginning to end in the passage. Just keep in mind, if it's too much reading, right, if the information is spread out over a large section of the passage or maybe the entire passage, which is actually very unlikely to happen, but if that's the case, then you're going to have to scan for answers just like you would for any other IELTS reading question type, okay? So, if the information's close together and it's easy to find, you may want to just read it all carefully. Okay, the second one, determine the word form required for the answer. Okay, we saw this earlier and just now, where you can often tell what form of word needs to go in the blank, and it can be a very good strategy for helping you to scan effectively for the right kind of information in the passage. The last one then, use the given information on the chart. This is just like any other IELTS question type. You're trying to use the information, even on the lines where information is completely provided and you don't need to fill in any blanks. Even this can be key information to give you clues about what you need to find in the text. So, study the flow chart. Just like you would for a diagram question or a summary question, you study that information closely, determine what you need to go back and scan for, and use all of that information there in order to help you make those decisions, okay? Study the flow chart carefully. That's an important part of answering these questions efficiently and correctly. Okay, so those are our flowchart completion questions. Hopefully you have a good sense of how to answer them now. This is a question type you are equally likely to find on the academic and the general training IELTS exam.